Okay, here we go on our sound journey with Reaper. So this week we're gonna not use our eyes, our visual sense, and we're gonna become musicians and sound artists and try to work in just kind of experimental sound collage. So we're gonna be diving into Reaper. Which is an amazing professional quality digital audio workstation, one of many different DAWs that are out there in the world. This is really great because it's free, so you can download it. User guide, like I showed in class, huge user guide. So again, this type of program has a gazillion different things it can do, and sometimes the menu situation can be a little overwhelming. So we're going to try to focus in on just the kind of few techniques that will be most useful for us as like primarily as visual artists, but then to also be able to use this to edit sound, to compose our own soundtracks or sound designs for our pieces, or even to make music in its own right. So to start, let's just have a list here. So in this part one, we're going to be just taking a tour of like the UI and learning how to drag in audio tracks or audio files. There's two main types of tracks. There's more than that, but the two main ones you should know about: audio tracks and MIDI tracks, which stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. So we'll focus more on that in future demos. This is more for like virtual software instruments or synthesizers. Audio would be recordings that you made with a recorder, with a microphone, with your iPhone, voice memos, whatever, as an audio file. So we'll learn how to drag those in, and we can go from there. So let's go ahead and start dragging some things in. From the beginning, when you open a new file, we can just see this blank thing here. We can see the kind of names. If we look, this is in the user guide, kind of in the beginning, and it gives us the names for these areas, right? So we've got main toolbar. These are different tracks that are placed horizontally. The arrange area would be the actual audio clips. Up here, the ruler/timeline, and then transport bar is where we see just the normal like play, stop, pause, loop, record, and the time code right here. And then at the bottom, usually we see the mixer control panel, and the meters. It's called VU or volume unit meters that kind of shows you for each different track, right, how loud each one is at a time. And so by default, all of the different tracks kind of funnel the signal to the master, where you can do some kind of last minute little volume tweaks and effects if you need to. Okay, so let's get some clips. I have some already right here. I have put these already online in Files, Reaper Materials. So just general rule of thumb, like we'll get in at the very end here, of grabbing your own sound samples and recordings. A great website called freesound.org. In future demos, we'll learn more about actually making our own recordings. General rule of thumb, make sure the file format is WAV or AIFF. So you might also see, MP3s obviously are very common. M4A also, some sort of download sites give you as that. So these are very compressed file formats. The file size is small, but if you're actually editing some sound design together, it's you don't want to deal with really compressed files. You want to deal with uncompressed, high-quality files, which is a WAV or AIFF. FLAC is also a lossless audio file. It's not compressed, but it's used more for like high-end audiophile type people, and it can be just a headache to unpack and to use in programs like this. So if you see that, just avoid it. Okay, so I have these already, and let's just drag these in. Actually, let's not do that yet. Let's get my AF and all these waves, and we can just select all of them, drag them in, and then we see separate tracks or single tracks. So I want to make these on separate tracks, and it's going to analyze it and make the little waveforms. We see that there. When that happens, we can see these repeaks files were created. So this is like an analysis file that automatically does, and it just helps because it basically analyzes the sound file so it knows what the waveform looks like and where its peaks and valleys are. So like next time you open up the program, it'll actually look at this repeaks file, so like very quickly it knows how to draw the waveform. So you can just keep those in. And okay, so now I've got like all this stuff here. I can kind of zoom in and out. So left, I'm hitting minus, 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 plus, plus, plus. Kind of horizontally zooms in and out. And there's a whole lot of keyboard shortcuts too. You can look through the user guides. I won't talk about those quite yet. But you can kind of hit plus right there. Okay, whatever. So we can see all of our clips. Let me move this over a little bit so I can see the information there. And you can see in the mixer we've got different channel strips. So each track kind of becomes a different channel strip in the mixer. We can see their kind of default name was given right there also. So if I hit space, I'm going to hear all of these at once, which is going to sound terrible, but let's go for it. Okay, that's actually not too bad. I already had like loop set on actually, so let me turn loop off. Zoom this out a little bit. Okay, so now just this one's playing. So right off the bat, if you dragged in a bunch of clips, you might not want to hear all of them all at once on top of each other. So a common trick is to mute or solo clips. So this M and S right here. So if I do S, so that has just soloed this Foot in Sand clip. So all these others are now turned off. You can kind of scrub around. That's kind of nice. Right, so not only that one's playing. I'm going to use the shortcut to go back. So if you hit W, that'll snap the playhead back to the beginning. Conversely, if you hit M, that will mute this. Everything else is still on. So it's common as you kind of bring things in. Maybe you want to like listen to each one individually to make sure you know what it is. These are quite short, so what I might do actually is turn on looping. So down here, toggle repeat. So it's called repeat here. And then when you do that, I think usually that won't be visible, but if you kind of just click and drag up here on the ruler, this will set your loop points. So let's solo this one. So just listen to one at a time to get a sense for what it is. Okay. So all of these were things I had recorded previously of just making weird breath sounds with my mouth. This is like light switch. And this literally is a recording of my foot walking in sand. So descriptive names. So once you've kind of gone through, you've soloed each, you've listened to each individually, you kind of get a sense of what actually everything is. Then let's look. Okay, so audio device. I guess user interface. We kind of talked about that a little bit. We can start clicking and dragging these around a little bit, but like overview, I think we're fine with that. If we go up to preferences, so at first you don't need to look through most of these things, but in the beginning you probably do need to at least confirm. If you go into audio device, you need to make sure that the correct device is selected. Now I am recording on OBS right now, so I'm actually routing the audio from Reaper through Black Hole, and then in OBS, Black Hole is receiving that, and I'm monitoring it so I can hear it, and also outputting it so it's going to the recording. For you, most likely, right, you'd either have speakers, or if you have like headphones plugged in, right, that would, or built-in output is a common sort of thing. Ultralight AVB, this is my audio interface, so we can talk more about interfaces later, and some other options that you don't really need to know about so far. So right off the bat, if you're having trouble hearing anything, go into audio device here and make sure that the proper thing is selected. You can look around with these other things too if you want to. We won't bother with that right now. Setting in and out points of a clip. So let's do this. Let me be breath 4. Let's do this. Okay, whatever. We're just gonna pick on you. And I can zoom in a little bit here so we can see it. So very easily we can move this around, click, drag it around. So by default, you can kind of see it's snapping to this grid. That's because up here in the main toolbar, there's a number of handy little tricks. This little magnet-looking thing, snap enabled, is by default on. So if you take that off, then you can kind of drag it more smoothly, so depending on what you need. And then setting in points and out points. So we can then, if I put the cursor right over it like that, click, drag, that is it's trimming the endpoint. You can see if I go that way, it's actually kind of looping it. And if I do this, so there's 2 different icons right there. So this one will trim the endpoint. And you can see if I go to the right, now that's going to repeat the actual clip. So that's how we can trim. Okay. This other little icon that showed, looks like this little, little arrows with a little curve on it. That is going to change the fade out. And also here we've got fade. So by default, this right here, it's auto crossfade enabled. Most the clips will automatically have their fades. So this is a really handy sort of thing if you want to fade that in more. And then let's maybe grab this here. Okay, whatever. And adding fade in, fade out curves, great. So looping, that's what I just did. Time stretching, let's see what this does. Let's drag this over here. If I hold Alt or Option, you see this became this little fist. So now if I drag it, see what's happening? So actually, I'm going to have a little fun with this. Let's do a different clip. Actually, let's do this one. So I'll just trim that a little bit, and I'll just copy, paste. Actually, you know what? I want to snap it now, so they're going to snap right together. And then, you know what? Maybe I'll just copy paste a few of these, and then I'm going to hold Alt or Option for each of these. Just go on the end. Actually, you know what? Let's turn that back off because I want to do a little more smooth. And I'll just play around and stretch these or squish it in different ways. Cool, whatever. Okay, I'll turn snapping back on so they kind of snap in place. Okay, so also you might notice, so if I hold Option on the edge here, it gives me this fist, which means I'm time stretching. If the cursor is in the middle, I've got this weird sort of arrow looking thing. If I click and drag, so that is just kind of moving the clip points around, or I should say where the sound actually, the waveform. So the trim endpoint and output is still the same, but you're moving the inside. So that can be useful. For each of these, I could go back in and play with the fades. And let me change the looping. And let's see how it sounds. W to go back to beginning. Okay, not bad. Time stretching, looping the playback of the whole timeline, right? So that's what I've been doing right here with this. So we should take notice that by doing this, you're not actually changing the way this is going to be exported. Like if you wanted, like on some track, you want it to loop for like a minute, just because you like set this on and set this, these loop points, that's the actual track is still only going to be like this long. So you can see right here, it's only like, like less than 4 seconds. That's just for as you're editing, as you're working. Sometimes it's useful to loop that one little point as you're trying to get the sound right. So again, if you just hold that right there, then that's actually looping it over time, and it's going to be exported to the final clip. Okay, mixing console and then setting levels. Okay, so for all of this, let's actually just so I can kind of hear some things over time. Let me start to get a little rhythm going here. Okay, so you can see as I play all this, we've got the levels of each one. This on the very left is the master. These are all fairly quiet clips, so really nothing is in danger of peaking. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to... Okay, so I just muted Black Hole on the OBS side, so hopefully in the recording, I don't think you should be hearing it now, but we can still see as he's going in. So one thing to keep in mind, let me see if I can zoom in here, see if this works. We can see it's going up, let's say this foot in sand, let's say it's going up to about -18. On the very top here, this shows us the peak. This is like the highest that the clip has reached. And strangely enough, you can see it's going kind of starting at this like -54, -42, -30, -18. So it's kind of going up to, it would be like a 0 decibels point. So this is counterintuitive. At first you would think, oh, like totally quiet would be 0, and then something loud would be like a higher number, right? In this case, they start as this kind of very low negative number, and it kind of goes up towards 0. The reason that is these meters show like 0 decibels. Like as we kind of do this right here, actually this kind of helps to see it, I think. So volume right now is set to 0 decibels. As I bring it down, it's going negative. I could boost it up a little bit also. So by default here, it's at 0 decibels, which means it is just 100% of the level that it was recorded at. Decibels is just a rating of the loudness of an audio file. It's exponential, which means if I were to do like volume -3 decibels, mathematically there's half the acoustic energy in that sound now. If I did -6, so there's another like half. If I were to go from 0 up to +3 decibels, now that's double the acoustic energy. So every 3 decibels, you get a kind of doubling or halving of that. So typically what you would do if you have like all these kind of clips going all over the place, you can kind of, usually you want to sort of take away. You want to be careful with how much you boost things up. Because I want to see like which one. Actually, none of these are really that loud, so I don't think I'm in danger of really peaking. But something like this can be dangerous if I'm like boosting this up a lot. Then you start to see these meters get into like yellow and then red, and that's what's called clipping or peaking, and that's going to kind of like gnarl and destroy your audio signal, and it's going to sound really, really gross. some genres of music, then that's kind of what you go for, but you kind of do that in a controlled way. But usually you want things to be kind of just nice and chill, like nothing peaking. In general, the mixing process would be bringing things down a little bit and maybe very slight boosts, but not a huge sort of hand. And then down here we see, okay, so mute and solo, we've already seen that. This route thing, this will be a topic for a future thing. We can sort of not only, because these are all by default going to the master, we could also route this into various ways. We could say like, oh, if I want to add like this one effect to these 4 things, but not to the other 2, we could route all of these to a separate track that has a special effect on it, and then bring that back towards the master. So there's all kinds of cool, complicated ways that we can do that we're not going to worry about right now, but that's in the routing. And then also in trim, we will worry about that later. And actually, to drag this up, we can, right here between the transport and the mixer, we can grab that up a little bit. And then these little slots here for all different types of FX. So maybe, let's look at stereo, mono, panning, width, all that stuff. We'll talk about effects in the future demo. So right here on the mixer, we see the panning knob. So let me just get down to maybe this one again. Turn this back on. So by default, you can see this is in the center. I can hold this, move it. Now it's in the left. And now it's in the right. And you can see this reflected in the meter also. So now it's mostly in the right. We can see the level on the right side is more. So common technique if you're making some sort of a collage, some are right channel, some are left channel, some are in the middle. You've got a kind of spatial feeling, like we have 2 ears because that allows us a kind of like 3-dimensional placement of sound objects in the environment. So you can play around with that. So a different way to see this, if you look at stereo width. So this isn't really giving us much option for that, but if I go to right click here, pan mode. So we can see some other modes that we can tweak that. Let's do stereo balance and see what that is. So that looks the same. It's just a slightly different algorithm. So let's do Stereopan. Okay, so now we get pan, center, left, right, and then this thing called width, which is interesting. So you can see on these clips, the left and the right are identical. The way I think these were recorded just on this microphone, so it's a mono signal. It's only even though we see 2 different, like a left and right channel here, this is a mono input, meaning there's not going to be this separation between left and right on a normal, like a song or something else that you might record with a stereo microphone. You get slight differences with the left and right channel, and that creates kind of a nice spatial effect. In that case, you've got the width here. So if width was 100%, that is going to kind of separate left and right even more. If you kind of went in and if width was 0, then that kind of takes that difference in left and right and it just kind of makes them equal. So then that creates a mono signal, which is left is equal to right. So that means mono. And then you could also do like width. If that's negative, then technically what that means is what was in the left channel has now gone all the way to the right channel and vice versa. And then we can also kind of, if I did something like this. Right, so now it's mostly in the left. This started as a mono signal, so it's the width isn't really doing much right now, but you get slightly different effects if you start with a stereo file. And then renaming tracks. So, this for me, the files themselves were named in a fairly clear way, but we can just double click that and say, I don't know, whatever makes sense to you. And then also if you just right click on here, we can go down to track color. You can do just random if you wanted. So we could, so usually we can all, yeah, item and take colors. So we can also set individual items as different colors, if that's the sort of thing that you like doing. Track color, we can like select the color here if we want. So because I already selected this individual item as a certain color, then that stayed that way. So that's just lots of different ways you could do that. You could select multiple ones also, change the color for all those at once. And we kind of see this track here matches the strip in the mixer, so that helps. And then finally, for you to get your own clips, you can grab these that I have up on Canvas. But then let's look at freesound.org, which is amazing archive of free sounds that you can grab. You just have to create an account in order to download. And everyone loves fireworks, right? So you can search for whatever, preview all of them here. This actually has a kind of cool color-coded thing here. So depending on the frequency, I think the way it is higher frequencies are more blue, lower frequencies are more on the warm side, like orange and red. And you can very clearly see the kind of how loud it is just from the waveform. So you could preview it. You can read some more, see the waveform, see the user. And then, so for our purposes, we want, this is great for us, right? We want a wave or an AIFF file. Stereo is great if you can get stereo. So that means that there's going to have a left and right channel. By the standard sample rates and bit depth, it should be around this. 48,000 hertz, 16 bits. These are great. Sometimes you might see, let's see if there's anything that's like way more insane. I'll just click a few here. Yeah, a little bit more. So this one you can see bit depth 24-bit. So this is a higher resolution. Technically, what sample rate means is in 1 second how many samples of data are there. So there's 48,000 points where it's basically the digital file is storing the value of that audio, which like in the numbers, it's going from +1 to -1. So that's really just what digital audio is. It's like a whole lot of data points per second. And then what bit depth is, it is the gradations from total silence to the loudest it could possibly be. So it's more of like a kind of vertical resolution. And so it's, I forget, do the math. 16-bit references 2 to the 16th power. 24-bit would be 2 to the 24th power. And, do your math to figure that out. 24-bit is just a lot more than 16-bit, obviously. So that just means you can get a more kind of fine-grained control over dynamics. So dynamics means a kind of going from quiet to loud and vice versa. But for the outputs, especially for what we're concerned with, 16-bit, totally fine. Once you get down to, like, if anything was like 8-bit, I would say that's not appropriate to use for doing sound work. Because 2 to the 8th power is just 256. And so if you imagine like from silence up to the loudest loud, there's only 256 kind of steps. Then that's why you get this kind of 1980s Nintendo, very tinny digital sound, because it's 8-bit sounds. And it's for our purposes, it's not going to be good. You could, like, at the end of that, you could do a little bit crush or downsample to create this kind of weird digital effect. But for the original sound that you're using, you want that to be as high quality as possible. So grab some of those, grab my files, and you can start kind of playing around with moving clips around.